Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series as we talk to paralegal and lawyer bencher candidates in the upcoming election. As always, the views and opinions are of the candidates alone. They don't reflect me, Justice and Pieces, Trials College, or any other education institution or organization I'm affiliated with. Today morning, we have Sam joining us. So, Sam, first of all, thanks a lot for taking the time to speak with us. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about who you are.
Well, thank you, Jean-Paul, for doing this. It's very kind of you to volunteer. And it's very important that you're doing this. It's very hard for independents like myself to get the word out of why we're running and so on. So a little bit about myself. As many people know, I am running for re-election as bencher, and you may be wondering why I want to put myself through the misery of another 4 years of being a bencher at the Law Society. That's a really good question. I did, in fact, run on the last time in 2019 with the full stop slate. As a matter of fact, sorry, the stop the stop slate. As a matter of fact, to set the record straight, it was actually I was the one who came up with the idea of running on a slate. I could talk a little bit in a moment why I'm now running as independent, but let's just now talk about why I want to run again. And listen, I think it's really important work that the Law Society does. But more importantly, I'm very concerned about the direction that the Law Society will go in if, in fact, the Good Governance Coalition, we'll call them that, although I think it's a complete misnomer of a name, and I rather just call them the cool kids, and that's what I'm going to call them, that if the cool kids win, and I really fear for the future of the profession if that happens. And I say we, the slate that I initially ran with, were able to defeat the statement of principles. But the reality is that we never really sort of got rid of that underlying ideology that that underpinned the entire cool kids agenda previously. Now, I want to be clear about something. I don't, a lot of people talk about wokeism or progressivism or social justice stuff or critical race theory. And it all sort of is coming together to some extent, but let me just sort of parse them out a little bit and be precise in my definitions of things. So when it comes to critical race theory, CRT, I don't have so much of a problem with looking at the world in terms of how racism has created differences in society. I think, CRT adds an interesting lens to analyze society, just like Marxism provides an interesting lens, or environmentalism, or feminism. The problem I have with the CRT thinking is when it becomes dogmatic. And I think when any sort of ideology, sometimes by its nature, becomes dogmatic, then you have problems. And then that sort of CRT analysis becomes what I now want to call wokeism. And I think that is what's really sort of happening to the law society and society in general. And that's what the danger is. And, the people who are promoting, you hear from the cool kids about how if you don't elect them, that we're going to lose self-governance. I mean, it is such a self-serving. I mean, they're the ones who are fear-mongering and creating a self-serving argument. I mean, really ask yourself, do you really think the Attorney General of Ontario wants to deal with a bunch of vociferous lawyers? So this is the sort of thing that the cool kids are starting to project onto the voting public, the voting profession, and to think that you think of their name, they're good governance, as if they're the only ones who truly understand how to govern a law society. It's that intolerance that's coming with their dogmatic approach that concerns me. And if you want to see what's in the future for the profession and why I'm running to try and sort of prevent this. I could go to Jordan Peterson. It doesn't matter whether you like Jordan Peterson or you don't like Jordan Peterson. The fact is, you see in the College of Clinical Psychologists this attitude where because Jordan Peterson made comments, again, whether you like him or not, on social media, then someone reported him, and therefore they're now saying, or the potential is that they're going to send him to sort of media training, and if he doesn't do the media training, then they'll punish him for that. Now you could say, "Oh, Sam, that's not going to happen for the law society," but I beg to differ with you. And as a matter of fact, it is happening. I suggest everyone go back and look at a decision a little while ago called Simone and the Law Society of Ontario. In that decision, it was a good character hearing. As we all know, you have to be of good character to be a member of the Law Society. In this case, it was a dental hygienist who had been disciplined for a minor issue. She was going through a good character hearing because she's now becoming a paralegal. Some anonymous person sent a letter to the Law Society saying that this person had made some comments on Facebook about anti-masking and anti-vaccine and so on in a private Facebook page about the issues. So the Law Society took this complaint and found her to be in misconduct because essentially they didn't agree with the views that she expressed. She groveled. The Law Society then found her of good character. Phil Horgan, who ran with the slate, wrote the dissent in that case. And he said that, listen, I mean, sometimes people, a lawyer, first of all, she wasn't even a lawyer when this happened. And secondly, you know, as lawyers, we have to use strong language sometimes, strong language in order to defend our clients. We have to take aggressive positions in society. And he said that unless the speech isn't preaching hatred towards some identifiable group, then we shouldn't be saying to people that just because you express a political opinion, therefore it's a misconduct. And I really fear that direction that the Law Society is going in. We have to prevent that. In a sense, JP, as I was talking to some relatives here over the weekend. I'm in Israel. I'm here for Passover, and there's a real, I feel there's a real concern that the Overton window of discussion within society and within the profession, specifically now within the profession, is closing. And if you go outside that window of acceptable discussion, well, what's happening is you're branded to be a racist or other names, or unfit to govern, or ultra conservative. And that's a real danger for a profession that relies upon our ability to think and come up with new ideas. And it's a real attack on reason. You know, if I question something, then automatically I become a racist for it. I mean, that's just, you know, that's not using your reason at all. That's just an ad hominem attack. But you're seeing more and more of that going on within the profession, and certainly that ad hominem attacks, or those attacks, and those people who are closing the Overton window of discussion are coming from the cool kids. So I think the next question you're going to ask me, and you're just going to sit there and just look at me, and I'll just keep talking, okay? But the next question, it's an obvious question, which I alluded to, is why did I leave the slate? And while I'm sympathetic towards what the slate wants to accomplish, I want to clarify a couple of things. So one is, the slate was not a single issue group. That was never the intention. It wasn't just simply about the statement of principles. It was about trying to get rid of that diversity, inclusion, and equity type of woke ideology. And the second thing, so that's one clarification. The second clarification is the slate didn't politicize the discussion. We were a reaction to what was already happening, that there was already a politicization. And frankly, the slate is trying to get rid of the politicization of a regulatory body. And keep in mind, as a civil society organization, we're a regulatory body. We're not a voluntary membership organization like the Canadian Bar Association, the Ontario Bar Association. If the Ontario Bar Association wants to engage in politics, if they want to pass a resolution that said that everything has to be about environmentalism, they can go ahead and do that. There's a regulatory body that has the power to discipline. We really have to be neutral. And to give an example of that, you know, in World War I, what ended up happening is those lawyers who didn't express support for Canada's involvement in World War I were actually disciplined. And that's, you know, I see parallels to then to now. But to come back to my own, so why I didn't run with the slate. So the first reason is despite them certainly sympathetic and certainly ran with them and believed in a lot of things that they talked about, nevertheless, I don't see that all the issues that face the Law Society are necessarily fall along the culture war. And so I think, you know, with you know, people like Lisa Bildy, who was basically running the slate, I don't agree with her that everything is a culture war issue. And I think that creates a lot of factionalism that is somewhat irreparable within the profession, and I don't want to run on that fault line. And I think there are other issues which are equally important. And also, despite the fact that I saw the necessity of having a slate trying to dislodge the statement of principles and the politics, the wokeism that had permeated the law society, and I think, as I said, still does permeate the law society. I think for the future health of the law society, I think electing independence is a lot better, because listen, I may not agree with everything that, Marxism or feminism or critical race theory may come up with, but at least I'm humble enough to recognize that my own sort of, and I'm sorry, I'm a classical liberal at heart. I have a little bit of humility in accepting the fact there may be some good things that it may be pointing out. And so I don't think it should be completely erased from the political spectrum. It shouldn't be erased from political speech at the Law Society. But I do think that the Law Society has to, be able to accommodate all types of views, and that could only be done with the elimination of factionalism, and that could only come with electing truly independent people at the Law Society. Because if the cool kids win, then you're still going to have, in the next 4 years, you're going to have another sort of, hopefully you're going to have an election where another slate will organize, or if the slate win, you're going to have enough, you're going to have this pendulum swinging back and forth, which won't be good for the future. But if you're going to eliminate that, I think a lot of independents would do that. One thing before you may have a question, Jean-Paul, I'll just continue talking. You're doing a good job of interviewing me. There's one thing you should know, the cool kids are running in part, they have their own agenda. A lot of them are just basically recycled benchers who lost the last time. And, you take a look on their website and they say that one of the things they want to do is look into changing the rules for the election to prevent a slate from happening. Now, number one, slates have always existed in some form. As a matter of fact, of recent memory, in the 90s, people like Larry Bannock and Bob Aaron ran on a real estate solicitor slate because there were issues going on with compensation of real estate funds that went bad. And so they ran on a slate and they elected maybe 9 or 12 people on that. So it's not unusual to have slates. And in fact, in past elections, you had sort of miniature slates because, you had McCarthy's who sent out an envelope with flyers. And in those flyers, there are like 3 or 4 lawyers who they were supporting. So you've always had that sort of you've always had that sort of miniature slate thing going on. But I think running on a platform that says that we're going to get rid of slates for the future, and that concerns me because, when the incumbents start trying to gerrymander the election outcomes to their preferred, what they think is a preferred result, they're really sort of making sure that they're never going to get pushed out. And, I'm a little bit of a Sir Karl Popper type of guy when it comes to democracy. And the true test of a democracy is the ability to kick the bastards out. And I'm very concerned. And this goes to show that their arrogance and dogmatism of the cool kids, that they think that somehow, we're going to be running on a slate only because we want to preserve democracy. I mean, that type of arrogance and presumptuousness is exactly what I think, why I'm running to try and stop that. Okay, Jean-Paul, you got a question in there?
Yeah, okay, let's kind of go unpack that piece by piece there. So you brought up, Jordan Peterson, you brought up, I think Simone was the case there at the Law Society. Is there a point at any point, the regulator needs to step in on speech? I mean, is it only if it rises to the level of a crime or a violation or what?
Yeah, listen, we have, I didn't mean to interrupt you, being a little bit facetious there, but the point is this: as a regulator, again, look what happened in World War I. You had people who weren't supporting, you had one person in particular who questioned Canada's involvement in World War I, and he was disciplined. He was told that, either you support the war or that's not compatible with being a lawyer, right? And think of it today, either you support certain ideologies, certain woke ideologies, or that's not compatible with being a lawyer. Look, if you can commit misconduct, if you don't, you steal money from the trust fund, you don't call your clients back, things that we would naturally consider as being misconduct, sure, you deserve to be, you deserve to be disciplined, and I'm an adjudicator on the discipline tribunal. But you don't start going after people for their personal beliefs. You don't start, there's a division in my mind in classical liberal ideology. There's a difference between the private and the public. And I think we have to maintain that difference because, listen, I represented some convoys, some of the truckers who were involved in the convoy protest, right? You have people like on the internet now, this guy from Castles, I can't remember his name, accusing members of the slate of, representing convoy, truckers. Look who they represented. I represented the guy who was with the brisket, Adam Skelly, for a little while, and at least initially, and then he went off and started hiring other lawyers. Listen, I don't care what you think of Adam Skelly. I don't care what you may think of the convoy. The point is that we as lawyers take a barrister's oath that says that we have to defend people. And it brings the reputation of justice into disrepute when you start arguing publicly that lawyers shouldn't be representing some people, right? I just find that, as a criminal lawyer, it really bothers me. I have to represent all types of people. I'm not, just because I represent someone who's accused of murder doesn't mean that one, they did it, or two, that I believe in murder. And similarly, just because I represented Adam Scully or some truckers, don't associate me with the cause. By the way, John Paul, I should point out to you that the guy I represented, the charges were completely withdrawn against the individual. And that's only because I represented him. So people out there who are talking about, you can't represent certain people because they represent certain opinions which we shouldn't be defending. This person would have been convicted if there's no one who would stand up and represent him. It really bothers me when I read that on the internet. It really bothers me when someone on the internet starts, because he doesn't like a friend of mine, Joseph Chiamento, who ran with me on the slate, that this person is actually doxing him on Twitter. He actually posted a photograph of Joseph's home with the address clearly visible, and puts a circle around the address. What is he? And no one's doing anything. The treasurer this was brought to the attention of the treasurer, and she hasn't done anything. Why haven't the cool kids spoken out against this? He's encouraging people essentially to go out and start, picketing this person's home or worse, right? And I think that's sort of very, very dangerous to do. And it's precisely, again, I go back to this dogmatism that I think we have to stop. Now, I think I went off on a tangent. I don't remember what your question was. What was your question again? Sorry.
I guess it was just essentially, is there a line to be drawn at
misconduct?
Yeah.
Right. So thank you. So, the point I'm trying to make now, thank you for that, for reminding me, is that, you got to stay away from people's beliefs, people's political beliefs, right? You discipline them for their professional issues that they do. And it's not a professional misconduct to try and defend a certain type of person. It's not professional conduct because you don't believe in masks or you didn't believe in vaccines. That's where the danger is. So yes, we have to discipline people. We should discipline people for what, for wrongs they do to commit against their clients, but not for some sort of perceived wrong because you don't like their political speech or their beliefs. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So Sam, then moving on, I guess the next piece there is looking back at the last 4 years. Essentially, when you started, you addressed why you're running again, but maybe you can kind of share with anyone here that's listening that doesn't know exactly what happens, at convocation, at committee meetings, things like that. And I'm sure that's part of the reason you're running here again. And perhaps you could elaborate in terms of what the last 4 years was like and why you're still willing to put your name forward to do another 4 years of it.
Yeah, well, listen, the last 4 years have been incredibly frustrating and maddening, mostly because the cool kids have controlled the agenda mostly, and they villainized and vilified people from the slate. Listen, the slate did themselves no good by being very disorganized and not really defending themselves and being afraid. Mostly, they're very, in many ways, the slate, most of the members are being very pusillanimous. But I'll give you a couple examples. So now the cool kids are going out and saying that the slate don't support libraries. Now listen, I was the one who brought the issue of the Law Foundation forward. It's the statute of the Law Foundation says it's supposed to financially support libraries. It's about supporting educational programs as well, but essentially it's supposed to support libraries financially. There were reasons, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, that they stopped supporting libraries. However, my point was, if you want to give more money to libraries, I'm a big library supporter. then let's get the Law Foundation to go back to start sending money to the libraries. That doesn't mean we should be cut the budget in other ways to support the libraries. It doesn't mean that our desire to cut the budget means we should stop supporting libraries. And that's what the cool kids are trying to say, and it's completely false. And as someone who really promoted the idea of the Law Foundation going back and supporting libraries, I take great umbrage to their accusations. Another thing was that towards the end with the budgeting in the last, the budget went up. I can't remember how much, I mean, $100, $190 or something. And, Sid Troyster in that convocation, when he talked to the budget, said that the budget went up to accommodate a modest increase in salaries for employees of Law Society. What he didn't tell you was that it was actually 4.7% increase to salaries. That's over and above the bonuses that the employees, particularly the management, received. Now, listen, management gets about $1.5 million. That's the management for 5 different director positions. And then I think there's a CEO in addition to the 5, or it might be 4 management director positions, and then the CEO. I just can't remember at this moment. You do the math, and keeping in mind that obviously the CEO is going to be making more than the managers, you could figure out how much each person is making. That is a stupendous amount of money. And then in addition to that, they've got their yearly bonuses. So listen, I saw nothing wrong with what was being proposed at that convocation to bring in a third-party auditor to look over how the Law Society does its manages its finances and manages its sort of governance policies. But the cool kids rejected that, and they rejected it because for dogmatic reasons, they want to protect their their progressive programs that they have going on in the Law Society. And they don't want anything, for God forbid, a suggestion should come from the slate, right? Because anything that we do is automatically bad or evil. And I saw nothing wrong with bringing a third-party auditor. So those are sort of 2 examples of sort of what has gone on to some extent. I mean, there's lots of smaller examples, some I'm able to talk about, some of them not. The Venture Code of Conduct has to go. The Venture Code of Conduct is consistently be used to stifle speech and used as a hammer or cudgel to hit the slate members over the head to keep them in line. Once it was already decided that it should be revised, and that report got buried. There was another report that was supposed to be issued at the end of this year. I don't know who will ever see the light of day, but the Venture Code of Conduct, again, it's basically a statement of principles for ventures. And if the profession should be allowed to think for themselves, the individuals, ventures, should be able to think for themselves. As a matter of fact, it used to be that nothing that went on in convocation was public, and it was Clay Ruby, the late Clay Ruby, who would go into convocation. Then when he left convocation, he'd go to the media and start telling the media exactly what happened at convocation. And it was only through that people are now sort of able to see a little that convocation became to be publicized and videotaped. And so I think, there's another aspect that you're not able to see what's truly going on. And I'm prevented from really talking about, I think, a lot of the mismanagement that went on at the Law Society. I mean, just look at the Metrolinx issue, right? I know what happened, but you could just read the first judge's decision on it. He said that the Law Society management missed out on 3 opportunities to deal with the Metrolinx putting the subway in that corner on University and Queen, right? Law Society missed out on 3 opportunities. And, I think the person who was responsible for that should be fired, quite frankly, particularly based upon what the judge said in that decision. But, apparently to say something like that is heretical. And I'm sure, someone will come out and say, look what Goldstein said, we should, hit him with a Venture Code of Conduct complaint. But, I think that's costing us money. We're hiring lawyers to do this. We missed three opportunities to do something. And I don't accept the version of events that the Law Society is giving as to what happened. But, so, does that answer that question?
Yeah, and I guess then what's interesting is both sides are kind of pointing at the other. Like, look, there's been problems the last 4 years. The good governance group is saying, well, it's because we had these 22 Full Stop members. Full Stop is saying, well, that we only had 22, and there's 31 that were not part of us, and basically saying, well, everyone's acknowledging there was issues, but who's the source of the problem there?
Oh,
So I mean,
look,
now
it's
yeah.
clearly John Paul. Listen, it's clearly the cool kids. There's no doubt in my mind, despite the fact that I'm not running with the slate. But the cool kids had a majority. A lot of the lay benchers voted with the cool kids. If you look at the irony is, if you look at the slate's record, the slate was completely disorganized. They never voted as a block. It's the cool kids clearly voted as a block. Listen, there's no doubt in my mind that if the slate wins, the Law Society will look like a Keystone Cops movie. However, if the cool kids win, the Law Society will look like Lenny Riefstahl's Triumph of the Will.
Now, Sam, as unaffiliated this time around, I know you've touched on it a little bit here, but anything you'd like to share with anyone listening about what you'd like to see in the next 4 years at Convocation?
Yeah, so I'd like to see the name come back. Like we should return to Law Society of Upper Canada. We should bring in a third-party auditor to look at the finances and look at some of the governance issues that go on at the Law Society. I can go on about that, but we just simply don't have enough time. I think there are real problems with everything all the programming being run into the Equity Committee. It gets buried, and so no one wants to question the Equity Committee and what they do. I think we should bring back the restaurant. I think we should expose or have some sort of sunshine clause for the salaries of management, and another couple of issues, getting rid of the venture code of conduct as well. There should be a lot more transparency in how decisions are made within the Law Society, so they can't hide everything all the time from people. So I won't be in a position in another 4 years, if I should be so lucky to win, to start being prevented from telling you what actually happened behind closed doors. I mean, a lot of it is sort of inside baseball type of issues, but nevertheless, they manifest themselves in a greater way. Listen, I want to go back to an argument. I'm sorry. I think it's really important to say that, look, listen, one of the problems that's going on in society at large, and what's messing us up in the Law Society, again, in the cool kids, is this, they want to close that Overton window to prevent people to think, right? All these terminologies like unconscious bias and microaggression, these are all terms, or systemic racism. God forbid you should question about that. It's all about result, nothing about looking at the intentions of decisions or intentions of people. It's all about preventing people from thinking, and that concerns me. And it's something I'm actually going to talk about. The Law Society every year has a Holocaust remembrance event on the 18th of this year. I strongly recommend people listen to it. You may be wondering, what the heck am I going on about? But I think it's important, because one of the things that the Holocaust teaches us for humanity is to avoid the problems, the pitfalls of the 20th century. And one of the things the Holocaust was about, the fact that a group of people took over a democratic government, the Weimar Republic, right? They got elected and implemented a system where it prevented from people thinking, and preventing from thinking morally. I'm not saying that somehow that we're going to have a recreation of some sort of Holocaust in society. I'm not trying to say the Jews are going to get slaughtered, or for that matter, any people are going to get slaughtered. But I am drawing the line between a dogmatic takeover of an organization and the dogmatic takeover where it closes the window of what's acceptable to talk about, and that leads to the inability of people thinking. And if you can't think, then you can't think morally either. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Holocaust Remembrance on April 18th. Maybe this is a shameless plug for everyone to tune into that Holocaust Remembrance. But as a little bit of a forspice, as they say in Yiddish, a little bit of a before dinner appetizer to get you interested in it, I think there's a lot to learn from Hannah Arendt's Iceman in Jerusalem, that book. And I think it's directly relevant to what's happening in the Law Society. And if you want to understand how I make the connection between Hannah Arendt and this election, you'll listen to that event.
Perfect, Sam. So last couple questions here. I know you got to go as well. I
could continue talking all day. This is therapeutic for me.
There are a number of students, newly licensed lawyers, maybe getting into criminal law or wherever. Any words of wisdom, any advice as they look to make the step into the profession?
Yeah, that's another issue which I think we have to worry about competency. I think it's crazy that that we're allowing people to do correspondence school and then become lawyers. Listen, when people phone me up and say they want to become a criminal lawyer, I treat it as a bit like in Judaism, and when you want to convert to Judaism, the rabbi says, no, go away. And it takes you 3 times to call the rabbi, and then they'll teach you about conversion. And I do the same thing, because criminal law is not for the faint at heart. You really have to be committed to doing it. And for that matter, I think you really have to be committed to the practice of law, because, to be a lawyer and to practice it isn't the only thing you can do. There's lots of other things that people can do being lawyers. But, the people who I've hired in the past, I have 2 people now working for me. And now let me talk about this one person. She's a young woman from India, had never been outside of her province of India, let alone India. And she came to Canada in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of the winter. She's all about 5 feet tall. I'm so proud of her. I love her. She's a great person. And she just kept phoning me because she really wanted to be a criminal lawyer. And she wanted to be a criminal lawyer because in Canada, because in India, she was afraid of being a criminal lawyer. She was afraid of her clients. There's a lawlessness in India. And she was just persistent. And I hired for that. And I'm so glad that I did, because she's done an amazing person. And there's another guy who I also hired, a little bit older, who took some time off and had some personal tragedy in his family. And again, he was just persistent in calling me and wanting to work for me. And he too is just going to be a great lawyer like her. So if you want to go into law and you want to go into a specific area of the law, you really have to be committed to it. And like in anything, life is, if you're lucky, you'll make some money. You're lucky if you get to be successful, but persistence makes up for a lot of things. And I think in my own life, I don't necessarily think I'm the brightest guy in the world, but I have been very persistent in my life. And persistence makes up a lot for things. And so I just say to people it's not about passion. You hear people talk about passion all the time. Passion, can go very quickly at your first bit of failure, right? It's that resilience and persistency that you really need.
Perfect. So, Sam, it was very nice talking to you today. Last question for any of the lawyers that are listening here and have up to 40 votes in the upcoming election. Why should they cast a vote for you?
Well, they should only cast 1 vote, and they should vote for me. Listen, for all the things I said, I mean, as I said, I'm worried about the future of the law side. Like, I'm worried for this future society. If you even if you agree with some critical race theory, right? But you see that there's a concern about dogmatism, then you vote for me. If you're concerned about the dogmatism, the factionalism that's taking over the law side, then vote for me. If you're a classical liberal and believe in individual rights and freedom of expression and so on, then you should vote for me. If you think that the factional law study is a problem and has to be stopped, and you want to elect an independent, then you should vote for me. I think, and then you should vote for me because I have the experience. I've done it for 4 years, and I really, and as a result of doing it 4 years, I understand the problems of the law society. The problems being that the cool kids have not let me or my friends try and really solve some of the problems of the law society because they were just simply ideologically against them.
Perfect. So thanks once again, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.